From Cypress Radio in Cypress, Texas, you've tuned in to the Special Ed Section 504 Radio Hour. And I'm your host, Louis Geigerman, and welcome back. This week, we're going to talk about evaluations. Primarily, we're going to talk about evaluations conducted by your local school district or charter school. And what are the things that parents should be looking out for, and just some of the technical issues regarding it. And with that in mind, I have a couple of guests. One is one that's probably been on more than anybody. That's Pat Freeze, who's an associate with our firm. He'll wave and say hi, Pat.
Hi, Lou. Hello,
She's an advocate
Misty.
with our firm. And newer addition is Misty Renegar. Misty Renegar is a former diagnostician from Amarillo Independent School District. How many years were you there, Misty?
34 total in education, but 28 as a diagnostician.
Wow, that's a long time. So, Misty, and now Misty's an advocate with our firm, but Misty's done so many assessments over the years that she probably did them in her sleep, after she retired. So with that in mind, we've got Pat and Misty, and welcome to the Special Ed Section 504 Radio Hour.
Thank you, Lou. Lou, I'm just going to jump in here. You said that Misty was a diagnostician, and for our parents who are just listening to this and are just getting into special education, you might want to say what a diagnostician is.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll let Misty tell you what a diagnostician is. How about that? Let's get it from the horse's mouth.
Well, feel free to jump in and add anything to this. A diagnostician is the person on the campus or at the district who conducts, we do lots of things, but conduct evaluations on children to determine or if there's a disability or need, and talk about those services. We often are the person who conducts the ARD meetings, gathers the information from the school.
Let's remember when we use the term ARD, that's not something that they use in other states. So
correct. So in Texas, it's called the Admission Review and Dismissal Committee. That's a lot to say in one breath. So we do call it an ARD meeting. And we just try to help coordinate services, keep the parent informed, keep teachers up to date on what the students' needs are, and various other things. But that's a lot of what we do.
Well, yeah, but aren't you somewhat, focused more on cognitive achievement, adaptive behavior,
Yes.
and what are those parts versus those for kids that may have some type of psychological emotional thing. So we'll kind of quantify that, if you will.
Okay. Diagnosticians are trained in the areas of assessment, particularly cognitive testing, achievement testing, adaptive behavior.
Which means?
It has a lot to do with life skills, how kids function at home, in the community, how they function in the school, in the classroom. And then once we conduct these evaluations, we really decipher all of the information, and we have guidelines on looking at the information and determining if the student may have a learning disability, an intellectual disability. Those are our primary areas of disability. Of course, speech therapists do their end, school psychologists do their testing. So we have specialized training in conducting the cognitive and achievement testing in particular, and analyzing the data that we get.
Okay.
I have a question. So Misty, if a parent gets an evaluation, ask for a full evaluation, and they get it, and the only person that signs that is a diag, are there other people probably doing their parts and the diagnostician just signed it? Or does everybody who participates in the evaluations, let's say the licensed specialist in school psychology that we call the LSSP, if the LSSP participated in the psychological part of the evaluation, are they required to sign it? Or I see it a lot of times, you know, it says a group of qualified professionals, and then I see it signed by one person, which is not a group. Can you explain that part to me?
Well, it is a group evaluation because teachers of the student give input. The special education teacher, if the student does qualify, they go through and they have to look through the data and give their input. They need to sign also. Anyone who does an evaluation and inputs their information into the assessment report, whether it be a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, well, they actually, occupational therapists and physical therapists would have their own reports, but a school psychologist, if they did part of the assessment, they need to sign that report because they contributed to that report. So yes, they
And
should
so,
be signed.
Lou, I don't mean to hijack your meeting. I just want to get clear on this. So pardon me, when a district does, let's say, an initial, a full individual evaluation, I have a mosquito, pardon me. When they do the full evaluation, that includes the psychological portion as well as cognitive and achievement. I have got a mosquito, pardon me. And then and the other parts as well. So again, if the licensed specialist in school psychology would have to be involved to do that psychological part, is that right?
It depends on what has been determined that we're evaluating for. If before you start your evaluation, parents have to sign given notice and they have to sign consent for the evaluation to occur. So the way we used to do it in Amarillo, we would have a meeting with the parent before any of the evaluations started. There is a form that we go through and we talk about each specific area and determine if formal evaluation needs to be conducted or if just informal evaluation needs to be gathered. So on the speech, say we're looking at a student, we think they might have a learning disability. We go through the different areas. When we get to the speech and language area, if there are not any concerns that the student might have a speech impairment, then the speech therapist wouldn't have to be involved in that assessment. We would gather information from the teacher, some of the teachers, and from the parent for that area. And same with the psychological area. If we're concerned that the student might have some emotional issues going on, then yes, we would want formal evaluation in that area. But if that is not, if there are no behavioral concerns for the student, then again, we gather informal information, and the school psychologist would not necessarily have to be involved because they wouldn't be required to do formal assessment.
Okay, that leads me to another question. I'm sorry. So let's say you meet with the parents and you decide, yeah, no problems. We're really mostly just looking for specific learning disability. So in the little pre-meeting, you decide, they all decide not going to have to do a formal psychological. And then 6 months later or a year later, the student starts acting up. They start showing signs of some other issues. Would you then, so then if the parent comes and says, I think we need to evaluate my child, I think the school should evaluate my child for psychological, would the school say, well, we just did an evaluation and we're not going to do it for 3 years? Or at that point, because the school has called this their full individual evaluation, are they stuck with it? In which case the parents are entitled to an independent evaluation on the part that the school failed to evaluate.
The school can always evaluate in between. We have the initial evaluation, and then we visit that every 3 years. But you don't have to wait for 3 years. Sometimes other issues come up. And I've seen behavioral issues come up and no one understands. I mean, it's going on at home, it's going on at school. We're concerned about what is causing the behavior. So again, if the student is already eligible for special education services, let's just say as a learning disability, for example, and other issues come up, it could be speech and language that comes up. It could be something happened and we need an occupational therapy evaluation. You don't have to wait for the 3-year period to arrive before doing new evaluations, because it can happen. I mean, things happen that new concerns come up and you still need to go back and reevaluate in those areas of concern. So you don't have to wait. And parents really should not have to go get an independent evaluation, because really it's on the school district primarily to do that evaluation. Does that
So
help
Lou,
out?
what is, yes, that does. I just wonder, Lou, I'm thinking letter to Carol, and if we call it an FIE and all that, could you delve into that a little bit?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. The Office of Special Education Programs, which an attorney here in Texas asked for a letter of clarification, asked a question, in effect, if we didn't do, meaning the school district, didn't assess in a particular area, we made a determination to not assess in that area, are we on the hook effectively to provide an independent evaluation? Because as the attorney was stating, as we understand it, we do one, the parents have a right standing to ask for one. Well, in the letter to Carol, which any of our listeners could look up on OSEP letter, that's OSEP, by the way. It basically said, if you all decided not to do an evaluation, and the parent you made an election to do it and decided not to do it, you are on the hook to provide an independent evaluation that the parent requested. It's just that plain and simple. And that was an opinion from OSEP. So they don't do it. Too bad, so sad.
You could, but in my advocacy, I always try to go along, let the district have another chance. I mean, yes, OSEP says they don't get a second bite at the apple, but just to be, what's the word, collaborative, or to go along to get along, right? I'd like to say to the district, would you, you didn't do a formal psychological eval, would you consider doing that now? And then I guess at that point, if the district says no, we did an informal, we don't see any need, they would have to give the parent prior written notice. Is that correct? And we should probably talk about what that is. But we have had to use letter to Carol a couple of times. But
well, I would say this. Okay, the only thing is, in that situation, I kind of take a different tact, because unfortunately, I find that the school district assessment, many times, I'm finding that those assessments are watered down into what is needed for the child. And frankly, who knows what goes on behind the scenes regarding guidance from directors and other administrators about how they write assessments. We don't know. We don't have that. But for me, an independent evaluation gives an unvarnished opinion without any hidden agendas of where the child's currently standing. So I kind of side on that. I guess I don't get along as well with some folks. So that's just me.
my thought on that, when I'm trying to get along, is if we force them to give us an independent, or if the parent goes and gets an independent on their own and brings it back to the district, that they have to consider it, and we'll talk about what consider means, but they don't have to accept it. So, and they're still going to want to do theirs. So I figure, let them do it, let them go ahead and do it, and then we're clean when we ask for an independent. That's just my approach.
Okay, that's another way to do things. So that's why there's chocolate and vanilla ice cream. Okay, so no biggie. Let me ask you just again, get a little deeper on just some of the testing, Misty. Why don't you cover the 7 domains that you look at with cognitive testing?
Oh, okay. You realize it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm going to try to pull these off the top of my head.
Well, if you can't do it, you
No, I
can't
think I
do it.
can. Just give me.
Okay,
um,
might be able to help.
there's basic reading skills, reading comprehension, math calculations, math problem solving, written expression, listening comprehension, and the last one escapes me. 2 in reading, 2 in math, written expression, listening comprehension.
Written expression.
Did I say, I think I said written expression, maybe I didn't, but yes, written expression, definitely.
Well,
Yes.
what I was really asking was the 7 domains in cognitive.
Oh, and cognitive. Okay. There is, I wish I had a cheat sheet at the moment, Lewis.
That's
All
okay.
right. You know what? Let me think about that for a minute because need to get my brain back to, in fact, I'm going to cheat. Y'all talk about something else for a second. I'm going to look it up because I don't want to
Okay.
misspeak.
Okay.
Since
Well,
I've
I sabotaged you. You know, I didn't tell you I was going to bring that up. So, okay.
That's all right. I will
He
look it
does
up.
that. He does that a lot. I Googled, I've got 6 domains. I don't know about
There are
7.
7. Okay, go ahead and tell me what those off and I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, for this says, this is from the DSM-5, 6 key domains of cognitive function. Complex attention. Is that one? Executive functioning, learning and memory,
Those are
language.
from the DSM.
I'm talking about the G's.
Right.
Oh, the G's, the GIA, the GS, the GV. I know those G's.
Here we go.
Okay.
All righty.
You know, not Geigerman. No, we're not talking about Geigerman. We're talking about the G's.
Oh, I thought they named those for you, Lou.
Oh, yeah, right. They did.
So, well,
I haven't
before
been-
you start talking about the
Here
G's,
they are.
I haven't
Oh.
gotten I haven't got my royalties if they name them after me. Where's my money?
can we say the G's are sort of new, and before it was they did all of these sub-tests and came up with a full scale IQ. Is that right, Misty?
Yes, before we would,
Mhm.
back when I was in schools to learn how to be a diagnostician, it has been a while, but the way we determined a learning disability, we would give one of the Wechsler intelligence test, which would
Mhm.
give us a verbal IQ, a performance IQ, and a full scale IQ. Then you would test in the areas of achievement. And one standard deviation is 15 points. If an area in achievement was more than 15 points, more than one standard deviation below the full scale IQ, then we considered that to be an area of a learning disability. But fortunately, things have changed significantly.
Unfortunately or fortunately?
Fortunately, no, we're glad that it has because there's been a lot of research that's been conducted, and the method of determining an area of disability is far, far better than it used to be. You know, you learn a lot as you do research. So we're really glad that things have changed.
So now it's provided in G scores. Is that right? So yes.
But I'm going to still look this up. So if y'all have anything else, I'm going to look this up right quick and then I'll jump back in here and because I want to get it to you, say them correctly.
Okay. Well, you know, obviously what we're trying to do, we're to the best we can with instruments is we're trying to get into the head of the student to see what they know, or well, number one, how their brain's working. Okay, how fast that they can respond to a question, how fast, how they store information,
Mhm.
if recall, um,
Mhm.
how, with memory, whether it's long-term memory or working memory, which is
Mhm.
more short-term,
Mhm.
those are so that's what our instruments that were developed really to do that. And I think you have your answer now.
I
You
do. I
found.
found.
Well, I could see that. I could see that smirk on your face that you had it. So so now, Misty, please give us the the
I will.
seven
So
areas.
the 7 areas that we are assessing in for cognitive assessment is fluid reasoning, crystallized intelligence, short-term working memory, long-term retrieval, visual processing, auditory processing, and processing speed.
Do you
In the
want to
area,
get into those a little? Oh, I'm sorry.
a
Didn't
little
mean
bit, yes, I sure can. Um, fluid reasoning, um, fluid reasoning and crystallized intelligence are really the two areas that they have found that have the strongest impact on learning of all these areas. Um, crystallized intelligence is really everything you've learned in school, at home, in the community. I mean, it's the wide range of things that knowledge that you have. Fluid reasoning. Hold on, because I really want to make sure I'm again. So I have this little chart pulled up. So crystallized knowledge is it's what you know, how you use language to speak and talk to other people, and how you listen and understand when others are sharing knowledge with you. Fluid reasoning is your skills at problem solving, solving novel problems that you've not encountered before. It's the ability to do that. And it's how a person can discover patterns and find solutions when they're learning. Processing speed is how quickly you can perform a mental task. And some of the areas in the testing are timed, especially like in mental processing speed. Whatever the test is, you have a certain amount of time, and it's how many problems can you do, or whatever the task is in that amount of time. Visual processing, it doesn't have anything to do with a student's actual vision, like needing glasses or something like that. It's how you use your eyes to learn in school and how you can see visual patterns. A lot of things that we learn have to do with visual patterns. And so that is involved in our visual processing skills. Auditory processing, again, it doesn't have anything to do with hearing. It's how you use your ears to learn. And this can be really important because some kids are very hands-on with their learning, even as adults. You all have probably figured out how you learn best. Can you just have somebody tell you how to do something and you can do the task? Do you need to see them and hear them as you're learning how to do a new task? So auditory processing is very important. Sound awareness skills, when kids are learning to read, um, being able to hear the sounds that the letters make is extremely important. And that's part
Phonics,
of
phonics. That's
phonics
where phonics comes into play.
and learning how to rhyme words. Kids, we start with kids when they're real little, rhyming books, rhyming words, different things like that. That's extremely important in the learning process, because if you can't process those sounds and pick sounds out, or take a word and change the beginning sound and make a new word, then that's going to be a struggle in learning to read and dealing with language. Um, Short-term memory is being able to hold information in your brain in your memory while you're thinking and learning. So math is always an area that I think about with short-term working memory, because you get to a stage where you're doing a problem, a math problem, maybe it has 5 steps to it. And you have to be able to hold each step in your memory as you get to the next step. So short-term working memory is extremely important. Long-term memory is how to store and later remember what you've learned. Being able to learn a task, kind of file it away in your brain, and then at a later time, go back and remember that information and apply it to what you're doing. So we look at each one of these areas, and when you're looking to see, when we get all the data together, including the cognitive testing and the achievement testing, what we're looking for now, Lewis, do you want me to go into this part now, or are you like
It's
how
okay.
we testing?
Well, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, you
It's up to
might
you.
want to just do a little bit about, I mean, you mentioned some of the achievement testing. You might talk a little bit about achievement testing and then how you bring it
Bring
together
it all together.
and looking at, whether something is expected, not expected, that kind of thing, right?
Okay. So when we start doing the achievement testing, this has more to do with the areas of academics that are in school: reading, writing, and math. And we're looking at basic reading skills and reading comprehension. In math, it's math calculations and math problem solving.
And reading fluency.
And reading, yes, and reading fluency. In written expression, there's some spelling, there's writing to a task to see how you can get your thoughts and ideas on paper. And what am I forgetting? Reading, writing, and math are the main areas that we're looking at as far as academics. So once all of the testing is completed, well, let me back up for a second. So when we're testing in each one of these areas, whether it's on the cognitive test or the achievement test, you have to give at least 2 subtests under each category. We want those scores to be what we call cohesive, which means they're basically within the same range. If you have 2 subtest areas and one score is a 90, and then you give another subtest and that score comes out as 68, you need to figure out why there's such a vast difference under reading comprehension if you have one subtest score of 90 and one of a 68. So what you need to do is you need to go back to that lower score and choose a different assessment tool, another achievement test, for example. Find the area that measures the same skill as that lower score, and then see what happens. Does that score come out closer to that 90, or is it still low? I mean, you want your scores to be cohesive, or if not, you need to investigate and see why it's not cohesive. So we're looking for a pattern of strengths and weaknesses in the cognitive testing. And if you have an area, let's just say that I'm going to go to the fluid reasoning. Let's just say fluid reasoning was low. Then you look at, especially compared to the other areas of cognitive testing, then you want to look at your achievement testing. Are there some areas in the achievement testing that are also low, that are highly correlated to fluid reasoning? So that's basically what you're looking for. Is there something over in the achievement testing that correlates with the area of weakness in the cognitive testing? If so, then that could possibly be an area where the student is struggling and has the learning disability in.
Okay, so that that kind of that gets toward learning disability. I mean, of course, you all and as a diagnostician also look at individuals with intellectual impairments. And so what is the What do you look for when you do that? Because I've actually had a show where we talked about that before, but what do you look for when you're saying, aha, this child has an intellectual impairment?
Well, once again, you want to go ahead and do the achievement and the cognitive testing,
Hmm.
but you also need to do adaptive social skills assessment. And typically, what we've done in the past, what we used in Amarillo, you do a parent interview and you do an interview with the teacher. Now, that adaptive behavior scale is going to have several domains within it. And you're looking, first of all, you want to see, is the student struggling at home and at school in these domains? And to have an intellectual disability, there has to be deficits, not only in the cognitive testing, but also in the adaptive testing. Although I have seen a student or two that, as far as functioning in the real world, they had some pretty good skills. They've learned how to adjust and manage, but then they still, I mean, it may not be on an age appropriate level, but you still have to consider how they're functioning overall when you
Well,
give that diagnosis.
yeah, I mean, I've talked with psychologists about this, so this is not me speaking, okay?
Mhm.
But the issue is normally when we see a kid with an intellectual disability, I, I, I hate to put it this way, but basically all the scores are low. It's like all of them are very, very low across the board. And what I've seen, I mean, that's your classic, my understanding, your classic profile.
It
But
is.
but what I've seen is kids that have strengths and they have weaknesses, and they have a graph like this as
Yeah.
the poor like one that's
Instead of
flat,
a flat
that's
profile.
flat. And I've seen districts try to push that intellectual disability label on a student because, look, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for the school districts because they say the kid's not making progress. What do you expect? The kid's got an
Well,
intellectual
their IQ
impairment,
is here,
and they
so
just
yes. Mhm.
right. So it's not fair for those kids that have those up and down situations. A lot of times, and this is sort of out of your domain. Okay, this is really maybe more toward those of a psychologist. One of the things that I insist on in those situations is executive functioning, because those executive functioning skills and the ability to attend will actually have a bearing on answering some of those questions in the cognitive achievement area
That
that
is.
can skew the results.
Mhm.
So,
Again,
so
I'm going to jump in here for our listeners and our viewers. Could you talk about what executive functioning is?
well, I could do it, or you want to do it, Misty? I mean,
I'd
whatever.
actually rather you do the executive
Okay.
function.
Well, it's sort of, a very smart guy. By the way, if somebody wants to look in the archives, Dr. Peter Simone did an excellent interview, one of our early programs um, about what executive functioning is. But from a layman's point of view, it's like an air traffic controller for your brain. Okay. Your brain does a lot of different functions. It stores information, it holds it, it processes it, and it spits it out. And ultimately you have information that's spit out. But you know, uh, attending, attention, holding somebody's attention and shifting that attention from one idea to another is a big deal in executive functioning. The other things we look at, they certainly they look at processing. Certainly, they look at um, uh, short-term, long-term memory, and what the brain's response to that. But if you think about all the things that an air traffic controller does, think about that your brain does a lot of functions too, and helping you process how you use information, how you store information, and as I said, and ultimately, and how you process it. So it's a crucial element, I think, that really, I think, should be should be part of most assessments that we see for kids, the kids. And I don't think I see enough parents asking for it. And I think it's absolutely essential that you do, because we get some really good information, and especially in cases of those individuals that have cognitive impairments, anywhere from an intellectual disability to ADHD to even an autism spectrum disorder. It can play a huge factor in the ability to learn. Is that a okay answer for everybody?
School moves very fast. And if a student's brain cannot change and adjust and go on to the next thing, that is very difficult for learning.
I've found so often, and I mean, I had one person that had difficulty, and actually this was more as an adult. The individual had ADHD, but they weren't hacking it when they were at graduate school.
Mhm.
And I said, and they were able to somehow get through college, and like music. They were doing they were like a music major. And I said, what hasn't been tested previously is executive functioning, and I'll bet you $1 that there's a problem in attention shifting for this individual. You know what? The psychologist did a neuropsychological eval, and guess what it said? Yep, it said that there was an attention shifting issue, and that really helped in creating accommodations to help the
Right.
individual to get through grad school.
Well, time
So-
management can also be an issue with executive function. The ability to recognize you have 30 minutes to perform a task or complete a task,
Yeah.
not being able to, recognize how long 30 minutes is.
Right,
just
so it's a being distracted. I mean, you're
Distractions.
around people, and I know people that have ADD major, and getting them to, they have an area that they may be very bright, extremely
Mhm.
bright, but they're so distracted by some other things. Oh, that's interesting. Oh,
Oh,
by the way, you have about 20 other things that you've got to do.
Right.
Cut it off,
Well,
So
I'll tell on myself a little bit. It took me a very long time to figure this out. I used to struggle with not being on time. When we would go to church, I would be running out the door with my shoes in my hands, and my dad used to tease me. I mean, I just say, I knew I had a certain amount of time to get ready, but just getting it done, or thinking, oh, I've got 15 minutes. I can do this this activity before I have to leave.
no, you can't.
Longer than 15 minutes, just so as an adult, I've really had to train myself to go, no, you can't get that done in that amount of time. So don't even start it.
Well,
Right?
a classic person with ADD, okay, or ADHD, they have so many things on their plate that they think that they can do at once,
Yes.
and they
And
can't.
they really have good intentions. They really want
They
to be
really
able to
do. They do. But it's like, if you could jump into the brain of somebody that really it's in there, you're like, oh my God, all this is going on. And you're like, oh,
It's like popcorn popping in your brain.
yeah.
Lou,
Yeah.
I think all this is great information, and I know our listeners and viewers are going to love this. But can we bring it back when we're talking about the evaluations and the parts of it and all of that? And I would love to do another session where we really get into it and we talk about scores and bell curves and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's information that we have that, if we can educate parents, the more we can teach them. But we need to talk about kind of the process of how it begins. And I'll speak to that just a little bit because you and I do a lot with Child Find. Let's talk about all of these rights of children with disabilities Lou's got it behind him, come from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and we refer to that as IDEA. So under IDEA, schools have a mandate. They are required, absolutely required to locate and evaluate and provide services for any student with a disability that affects their ability to access the education in the general education setting. So many times schools don't live up to what they're supposed to do according to the federal government. But how it should work is that the school sees that there's an issue with your child, and they come to you and say, we think there might be, we think there might be an issue. We would like to evaluate your child. And then the parent would say yes. And then you sign consent. The district cannot evaluate without the parent knowing what they're going to do and agreeing to it and signing consent. Well, they can, but that's a caveat we'll talk about later. Or a teacher, the teacher could go to the administration and say, hey, I think this kid should be evaluated. Or the parents can contact the school and say, I think my kid, the grades are falling, or my kid's just not getting math or whatever. I really think he should be evaluated. Or my kid is having all kinds of psychological issues. It could be any number of things. We need the district to evaluate to see if my child qualifies under IDEA. So once they say, yeah, okay, we're going to do the evaluation and consent is signed, then there's a certain amount of time that the district has, and it's different in different states have different time limits. In Texas, the schools have 45, correct me if I'm wrong, 45 school days from the date the parent signed consent to complete their evaluation. Is that right, Lewis?
Well, no, not exactly. They have 45 school days when the consent's done. Now, they can take 15 days. School district can take 15 days to have a meeting and then, do their consent. So technically, it could be it's supposed to be 45 school days when consent is provided, but
on the consent from the parents in particular, it is best for them to make the request in writing.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Don't just make a phone call, because you want something, date your request and get that to the appropriate person at school.
Yeah, it is 45 school days. It is 45 school days. But
okay, so after that report is finalized.
Wait a minute. I want to finish on the timeline issue.
Okay.
It's 45 school days, okay, and then 30 calendar days thereafter to have a meeting. However, if the request for the assessment is between 45 and 35 school days before the end of the year, the end of the school year, then they have to finish the evaluation by June 30th and have a admission review and dismissal meeting within 15 school days when they come back in the fall. Okay. If it's inside 35 school days, they'll continue the countdown in the next school year. So just FYI. So try to get it in as early in the spring as you can.
Really, as soon as you know that there's an issue, get your request in.
Right.
Or if you suspect, that's the key word. If the district suspects a child may have a disability, or the parent suspects a child may have a disability, you can ask for the evaluation. So let's say your student is evaluated, and the district can find that the student indeed has some disabilities, and like Misty would do as the diagnostician, would typically at the end of the evaluation do a summary and then make recommendations for the district, things that might help this student based on their particular disability. What I find is that district employees don't always make as many recommendations as if you get an independent evaluation, and you're going to get some really excellent ideas about what might help the child.
That's what I said. That's what I said before when we were talking
Yeah.
about IDs previously.
Right, exactly. And so I want to jump real quick to, because, okay, let's say your child or your child could be DNQ'd, does not qualify. That is a possibility. If the evaluation is completed and you have the meeting and the district says to you, I'm sorry, your child doesn't qualify under any of the 13 categories under IDEA. And that is 13, but one of them is other health impairment. And under that, there's just, all kinds of things. So if the district says your child does not qualify, they have to provide you with prior written notice. That's sort of a misnomer, because sometimes you get prior written notice before something's going to happen, and sometimes you get prior written notice after something happens. So let's just call it notice. So the district has to give you notice, and then according to your rights, you can pursue that. I guess you would go to due process, right, Lewis? If the student doesn't qualify,
I don't think.
Or you could ask for an independent.
Well, you can, but I mean,
Mhm.
what prior written notice is effectively they have to say what they considered, what what they're doing about it, and what their decision was, and they have to basically prior written notice, for a better way to explain to a layman, is basically it boxes their argument in. That
Mhm.
puts them out there where they are.
It has to state that, what the decision is based on. And what you're basically saying is, we're not going to provide your child with special education services based on X, Y, and Z.
That's right. So, but it
But at
boxes
that
in
point,
their argument is what it does.
but the
Yes.
parent, but at that point, a parent could request an independent evaluation. Is that right? Once the district has evaluated a child, and if the parent disagrees with the evaluation, parents don't always disagree. Some evaluations are spot on. They're fantastic. But if a parent disagrees, they can ask for an independent evaluation. You don't have to tell them what part you disagree with, but I like to, Lewis may not. I just like to give them. And if you say, well, it's this one particular part, the district may say, well, will you give us another chance? This is all stuff we can talk about another time. But what I wanted to do is, let's say your child was found eligible for services. They put accommodations in place. Then after that, every year on the anniversary date of when the IEP, so if your child qualifies, then the school prepares a written document that's called the Individualized Education Program. It's referred to as the IEP. Very important, IEP. Write that down. The IEP has everything in it: what your child's present levels are, where they're functioning. Let's see what else. It talks about goals and objectives, what the school expects your child to be able to achieve within the next year until we get back around again. Talks about services. It talks about so many things, but that IEP is
strengths and weaknesses.
Strengths.
Very
well, we'll do
important.
PLAF, I think, another time, right?
No,
I hope
you're
you have
right.
us back.
We don't need to do PLAF now. Okay.
Okay. So every year you come back, you don't get a new evaluation every year. The evaluation is good for 3 years, but every year you come back and you do new goals and objectives, or you see, well, when report cards come out, you'll get a progress report. So you will know how your child is doing in terms of achieving their goals. So at the third year, on the third year, the child has to be reevaluated.
Or considered for reevaluation.
Considered, right, for reevaluation. And this is what I had prepared to talk about. I don't know if we have enough time, Lou. But
Oh, go
let's
for
just,
it. We've
all
got,
right, I'll do what
we've
I
got
can.
13,
Let's
you've got
just say things,
13 minutes. You've got 13 minutes.
I can do it. Things have been rocking and rolling and it's all good and your child is making progress. They still, they still have some disabilities. They need more help, but things have been good. So at 3 years before a reevaluation, the district must conduct a review of existing evaluation data. That is referred to as a READ, R-E-E-D. They must do a read. But for the read, there's a few exceptions here. If the parents and the district, even before the read is done, if the parents in the district say, look, this kid has the same disabilities as before, nothing's changed, he's making progress, we're on the right track, we don't think the school needs to reevaluate. And the school says, yeah, you're right, we don't think we need to either. They can, you should put that in writing, but there's no reevaluation required. There's no read required at that moment. Now, the read.
You have to do the read, yeah. You still have to do the read because that becomes the new assessment. You don't do any new testing. You might, yeah.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's not an FI, it's not an FIE.
Right.
It becomes the full data forward. We can talk about that later. So
I don't think so, actually.
Well,
I
think there's some decisions to that effect, that it's not an FIE though. They can't say that that's our FIE.
I know what you're thinking. Hang on just a minute, guys.
That's all right. The clock's just ticking. That's okay.
Okay, so the reevaluation commences when the read takes place. Now, the read, you do not have to have the district does not have to convene a meeting for the read. However, now Lou, this is a question that that I have for you. If the IEP committee looks at the read and parents are part of the IEP committee and they don't have a meeting to do the read, how do they do it? How is parent included in that read when the school says, oh, we did the read? Parent wasn't included. Parent's part of the IEP team. How do they justify that?
I don't see how they do justify that. I think that the parent has to be consulted on anything regarding the kid. That would be my non-attorney opinion.
Well, the parent does need to be consulted because there's a place where you update parent information. You need to ask about health situations. If anything has changed in the last 3 years, anything in the sociological part, is anything changed in the family, or what do we need to report? Because these are things that can affect how the student is doing in school. So
yeah.
You do need, and behavior. You need, mom, dad, is there anything going on at home that we need to know about that may be affecting the student's school or that may present a need for more evaluation? So yes, parent information is very important in a read.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they can't. You're doing that without the parent isn't going to cut it. You
have you ever seen it, Lou? I have.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, but I personally would have heartburn for that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'd have to. I think I'd have to throw the penalty flag on that one.
Okay.
And let the Texas Education Agency take a sniff at
that. So anyway, as part of the reevaluation, the IEP team, and I'm looking at this here, and this is from IDEA, that as part of any reevaluation, the IEP team, that's where I was getting that, must review the existing evaluation data, including evaluations and information provided by the parents. There you go. They would have to do that by some way.
There you go.
The current classroom-based local and state assessments. So in our case, the STAR and classroom-based observations. And observations by any teachers or related service providers. So that would be related service providers, Lou, OT, that sort of thing,
Mhm,
occupational therapist.
mhm.
Speech is not a related service, is it?
In
No.
Texas, it's not. It's an instructional
direct-
services, but in other states, it may be considered a related service.
Okay.
But but I want to jump in here because I think this is
Please
really
do.
an important point. So
Mhm.
we have this read, and then the district says, hey, do you want to do this? Or do you know, well, invariably, the way I find that schools couch the read to parents, like, oh, the kid's not going to, his disability hasn't changed. He's still the same. I very rarely, I can't be honest, I can't recall a time when they've done a read where they brought up, oh, well, we can use that to update the IEP, to update the program. I rarely see that. I see that more in meetings that I attend, unless I bring it up. They
Mhm.
basically say, oh, well, you know, they only speak about whether the child continues to qualify. I said, you know what? There's another reason to do an assessment, because to update the IEP, and I think we need additional information. They said, oh, you're right, Mr. Geiger, but you can do that. We can do that. But I'm telling parents, that 3 years is a long time between assessment and kids change. And we need to have current information to know where they're functioning to develop IEPs. I strongly recommend parents don't blow it off. Hey, I have a kid that's failing now. And we're now and it's been several years, since it's been beyond 3 years where this kid has done an assessment. They did a read back a couple of years ago. And so the issue now, it's almost 2 years since they did the read. And guess what? They blew it off. They did a read. They decided not to do an assessment, and now he's failing. Having new assessment data is crucial when we're building an IEP for a kid.
I would like to
Mhm.
add one thing about, especially if a student has previously been diagnosed with a learning disability,
Yeah.
it can happen that with new testing, scores may indicate that they no longer have a learning disability.
Correct.
And when you're looking at eligibility for services, you're looking at, does the student have a disability, and do they need
Mhm.
specialized services that can only be provided through special education? So
Right.
it doesn't happen very often, but it can.
Well, you
And
know, that's a risk, but you know what I
it is.
find, where I
That's what
find in a
parents
lot of
know.
those, you know what I find in a lot of those situations? They may have a specific learning disability, but guess what? Oh, they have another health impairment. They have ADD or ADHD. I find that that districts far less commonly identify other health impairment in students for eligibility for special ed. I just do. I find that they because one of the reasons is in Texas, they have to have a physician as part of the team, and they don't
Yes.
want to pay they don't want to pay for a medical eval, and that's why it doesn't happen. So I'll be honest, I've been doing this now, what, 28 years now. This is my 28th year. Um, I can't remember a time when a kid was knocked out because they had it. What we did find is other disabilities that they had.
And there could be. It's just sometimes I've had parents that were extremely disappointed
Yeah.
because there wasn't another health impairment or another eligibility for services.
It
And
can
they were
happen.
shocked to know
Well,
that it could happen. So
well,
it's
you know what, you would know that if the kid was really borderline when they did the assessment the first
right.
time. That would be the thing that would be the dead giveaway. But you know, that's something that we have to have a discussion, but I'll look at other things that might be there. You know what? We're less than 2 minutes away. We've been all over the place today on evaluations, but I, if, let's try to succinctly say what we think is important here in these assessments. From my perspective, parents have a right to ask for an assessment. I think they should do it every 3 years to determine where the kid is. Misty's point is well taken that it could knock a kid out of SPED, but remember, they have to assess in all areas of suspected disability. And perhaps previously, all they did was cognitive achievement testing. I've seen that happen a lot, where all they do is a cognitive achievement, where there might be an underlying psychological issue, or such as ADHD, et cetera. Anybody have any would like to encapsulate where they are and kind of
I want to say one thing.
summarize?
There's still, Misty, there's still a thing where you think one thing and I think another. We're going to figure that out
Yes,
about
we
whether
will.
the read is, whether the read
we'll
is the
talk
new
about that.
evaluation or whatever. Right.
Yes.
And I thought I had it. I was looking for where I had highlighted in toto. I don't think it's true, but you might be right. I'll give you that. I have one thing. When a reevaluation occurs, no, wait. Yeah, let me back up. When an independent evaluation occurs and the school receives it because they paid for it, and they schedule a meeting to go consider the independent evaluation, I always request a copy, or have my parents request a copy, so that I can go over it with them before we get to the school. I've seen parents who were just, I don't know what the word is, just floored, because in that meeting is the first time that they heard that their child has autism, or they don't understand what in particular one, what a learning disability was. And I was in one where the mother just started crying. And the child had a specific learning disability in reading in both areas and in math. And she just thought, he'll never, he's intellectually disabled, crying. There are some districts around here, the one I live in particularly, that has told me, Pat, you're not a diagnostician. That's what I was told by the SPED director. You're not getting a copy of this because you're not a diagnostician. Well, maybe not, but I've been doing this a long time, and I know how to read those reports, and they're my clients, they're my people. I want to go over it with them, explain it to them. And the district, from my research, the district does have a responsibility to provide that to the parents before the meeting.
I
So,
agree
yes.
with you. I agree
The
with you.
It should be explained to the parent before you sit down in that meeting. It's not, I don't know what the legal part of that is, Louis, but you should never just drop something in a parent's lap like that.
Well, they're an equal participant in the development of their child's IEP.
Mhm.
And because of that, they have to be made aware, have the same information the school has.
Well,
Okay,
there's a
that's,
lot.
well, and the school will say, oh, we went over it with them. What they have is they had somebody call and read it to
Not
them.
enough.
Parents have no idea what that means.
Hey.
If they have hired an advocate, they deserve to be able to have that
Right.
advocate explain that to them in their own private time there.
That's right, and they can get records via FERPA. They're entitled to their child's educational record.
Right,
Look,
exactly right.
We've talked a lot of issues about evaluation today, and I think people listening to this, I hope they weren't thinking like we were all over the place. We were in a lot of places on evaluation, which is fine,
ADHD.
but that's okay. I mean, I think there's some really useful information. I think we could probably speak another couple of hours on this, and maybe we'll figure out another day to do topics on evaluation, because I think it's something that's important for everybody. But I want to thank you both for being here. I want to thank Misty, your first time here. I hope that you felt that it was a good experience with us today. And
Can I
being
add
a-
one thing, Louis,
Sure.
on parents requesting evaluations, just very quickly?
Yeah.
We are obligated, schools are obligated to serve children starting at age 3. So please, if you think your child is struggling in an area, please don't think you have to wait until they actually go to school. You can, at 3, Child
Well,
Funds,
actually before they're
Before
3.
that's through a different organization. But anyway,
No. They have to be able to provide services beginning at
yes.
age 3.
When they're
So they would
3.
actually, so they will test before, a couple of months
Or-
prior
or
to
if-
when they turn 3.
Right,
That's
or
what-
if your child's 4 years old and you still don't
Right.
think their speech and language
Right.
ability,
Right.
please don't think you have to wait until they're enrolled in public
No.
school, because
That's-
your the school that you live closest to would be obligated to do the evaluation.
That's salient point. Look, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, Misty, and and Misty's an advocate here in Houston, how would they get in touch with you? What's your email address?
It's such a new email address. I want to say it's on the website. It's on Lewis's website. It's mdkraus62@gmail.
Is that it? Is that
I
it? That's
think
not the
so.
one
It's
that's
Kraus.
not the one I sent to you. That's okay. If all right, it's on my website. Go to narda.org, narda.org. You'll find Misty on there. Pat, what is your email address?
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to give you mine, but if you want Misty, email me and I'll forward it. Okay. My email is very difficult to remember. pfreeze@gmail.com. Freeze is FREEZE. No dots. pfreeze@gmail.com.
Thanks, you guys, for coming. This is Louis Geigerman with National RIP Advocates. Our website is narda.org. If you want to touch base with me by email, it's nationalardadvocates@gmail.com, nationalardadvocates@gmail.com. If you want to ask a question about the show, go to SPED Radio, SPED Radio, 103.5 @gmail.com. And if you want to tweet me, it's at Louis Narda, at LOUISNARDA. The cypressradio.org exists by donations, so you can make a donation to keep the special ed 504 radio hour going, and other programming on this station. So I want to once again thank my guest, Mr. Renegar,
Anytime.
Pat Freeze. You all have a great day. We'll see you on the radio and the internet. Take care.
Bye.